Shalom and welcome to another edition of our Daily Bread. I'm Messianic Torah. And this week's Parashat is the third Parashat of the book of Shemot, also called Exodus, and it's called Bo, which means go. This week's Parashat starts in Exodus or Shemot 10:1 through 13:16 with the Haftorah in Jeremiah or Yirmiyahu 46:13 through 28. And my message for 2017-18 is called Learning from Humility. So let's dig right in. We see in this week's parasha we get the bulk of the plagues, right? And it still illustrates this point about Paro having a hard heart, Paro not letting the children of Israel go, Paro saying, well, you can go, and then changing his mind, or you can go, but you can't take everybody else. And then in verse 10:3, it says, And Moshe and Aharon came in unto Paro and said unto him, Thus saith Yahweh Elohim of the Hebrews, How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, that they may serve me. So this phrase, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? It really puts all of the plagues in context. What is it that he's not doing? What is his problem? Why does he keep getting plagued after plagued? It's because he refuses to humble himself. And so as we start to look at humility, right? The title of this message is called Learning from Humility. And it's really got a double meaning. This parasha is really about humility. And the message that I'm creating right here and that we're supposed to be learning is how to learn from humility. So if we look at humility, the opposite of that is pride. And if we look in the Bible about how pride is described, even with Paro, it's a hardening. It's a hard heart, right? It talks about the proud, and being stiff-necked, and how that's like rebellion. And we see the opposite of humility, which is often even physically, you bow down, you humble yourself, right? It's not one who tries to stand firm. It's somebody who's soft. Well, how does this affect learning? Well, we see this with the Pharisees. The Pharisees were called blind, and their problem was that they thought they weren't blind. If they don't even know they're blind, how could they possibly be healed, right? As Messiah said, right? So because they're not even able to recognize their problem, that's like denial, it can't be fixed. And this is the same for people when it comes to learning. If you think you know something, then what you're essentially doing is closing that box. You're saying, that box is already full. I already have that knowledge. And even if people hear and you're talking, once they've already decided and identify in their mind that they already know that, there's a portion of their brain that shuts off. And they're not going to learn. And they're not going to pay attention as closely. And they're not going to change. And that's the problem. Because it's kind of like, it's like going down the good path, right? Messiah is called the way, right? And a way or a road leads somewhere. This is the function of a road, is that you just stay on the road and it'll take you to the destination where that road goes. And if that's where you want to go, then you just determine what's the proper road that'll take me there, and then you stay on that road. If you stay on that road, you'll get to your destination. Well, the Torah is like that for us. It's a road that takes us down a certain path. Now, if we decide, hey, we kind of got on the road, but we got our own ideas, I think I'm going to go right over here and get off the road, well, then there's no guarantee that your freestyle ways of just coming and getting creative with it are going to actually get you there. Your ideas aren't paved yet. They're not a guarantee to take you there. But God's way is a paved road, and it'll take you all the way there if you can just stay on it. Now, in the same way, as we're going along this analogy of roads, we can see that our roads have lines on them. They tell you where to go, where not to go. And guess what? People are going both directions on that road, right? There's people who are going the other way. They're going away from the destination. And that's where the danger happens a lot of times, right? A lot of crashes happen on a 2-lane road because you got cars coming, 70 miles an hour one way and 70 miles that way, and if that person veers into your lane, then there's a crash. And it's those people that are going the other way that can end up killing the people who are going that way, right? And so there's lines on there. There's lines on the road. There's little bumps on the side of the road that lets you know, hey, you're veering off the road. It's called a rumble strip. It shakes the car. It's supposed to wake you up and tell you, hey, you're going off the road. Get back on the road. You got a steering wheel, right? And the steering wheel is just like our will, right? If we're on the road, we're steering. If the road turns left, we got to steer with the road. Wherever the road points, we have to try and stay on that road. That's how we make choices. That's our will. Sometimes our will, just as Messiah said, not my will, but thy will. In other words, if the road turns left and I was thinking of going straight, I'm going to follow the road. The road that was laid out for me is going to take me where I need to go, even if it's different than what I thought. Because the road already goes all the way there. Don't assume you know more. And the road starts to go this way and you think, yeah, but if I just go straight, I'll get there too. Or you'll just end up going over the edge of a cliff or out into a field, right? So those rumble strips, they're important. They're warnings. We have rumble strips in our life. We have prophets that come and tell Israel, hey, you're getting off track. You need to get back on track. You're starting to do idolatry. You need to get back on the right track. There's scriptures. Sometimes it's a Bible study that gets you back on course. Sometimes it's your friend. Sometimes it's somebody you disagree with that says something and it irritates you, and you're so irritated you're going to go and prove them wrong. But in your study, you come to find out maybe they're right and maybe you were wrong, right? If you want to stay on the road, you got to pay attention to the signs that are already put in place for you to correct you, to bring you back. Knowing the whole Torah, reading the whole Bible, is like those rumble strips, right? Because if you go and you have a little limited knowledge, you'll think you're on the right track because you haven't read the whole book yet. When you read the whole book and someone comes and tells you a stupid theory, and they haven't read the whole book, you're going to be able to identify it easier because you have your own knowledge. That's that rumble strips to let you know that that doesn't sound right. This person's trying to tell me that I should steer over here to the right. All of a sudden the whole car is shaking because my Torah study is saying, wait a minute, I read this whole book and that doesn't really line up with all of the patterns and everything. So then you get to go study and make the course correction, right? And then a lot of people out there, they're listening to pastors and preachers, rabbis, right? That's like sitting in the passenger seat. You're not even driving. You just show up to the congregation on the weekend and let somebody else do the Bible study. You're just going to listen. You didn't crack your book open. You didn't spend hours preparing and doing all that, looking through the Torah portion, figuring it out all through the week. You say, I'm busy. I got other things to do. I'm just going to sit in the passenger seat. I'll let the pastor. He'll do the work. He'll do the driving. I had an experience one time, which goes right along with this. We were on a road trip, and a bunch of us were in the car. We're all conked out, falling asleep. We were all tired, very long trip. What happens? I get woke up because the whole car starts shaking. I wake up like, what's going on? We're driving off into a field. The driver fell asleep, and we're driving into a field. Thank goodness it wasn't like off the edge of a cliff or something, right? And after that, I don't really let other people drive on a trip. If it's a road trip, I'm driving because I don't trust them. Because I know I'm not going to fall asleep at the wheel. No matter what happens, I'm going to make sure that I'm paying attention. But when you have your whole understanding in your faith and your religion is built upon DVDs you watched and YouTube videos and emails you get from Israel and this person at your congregation or your pastor or what you kind of heard, and you did this one Bible study this one time on the book of Isaiah and you did this other thing, that's just a mashup. of all kinds of stuff and other people's studies. And that doesn't count as knowledge, right? You'll formulate that into something, but it's going to be a Frankenstein mishmash thing put together. And then you're going to live by it and try and tell other people? Don't do that. You need to do your own studies. You need to read the whole Bible yourself from cover to cover. You need to have then gone back and did your word studies and did your this and did your that. People all the time, they're repeating stuff. That's trash. You know? It doesn't hold up. You know, it's like, and people love this stuff. There's so much stuff in the Messianic thing that people, that's Hebrew thinking and that's Greek thinking. Okay, that's a horrible theory, and it's totally inaccurate, and it's not even logical. You know, it was put together, and it sounded good, and nobody really did any research to check it out to see if that made sense. And then people just keep repeating it and using it and pushing an idea that's not even logical. Is it really that Hebrews only thought concretely, not conceptually? What's anger? How is that concrete? How about love, which is what the whole Torah is about? Is that a concrete thing? Because they basically teach that, well, it's all about the house and the field, and it's all concrete things, and there isn't these other things. And that's totally stupid. Emotions aren't concrete things. And I'm sure the Hebrews had emotions, and God has emotions. How do you define it? There's definitely concepts. How do you define knowledge? It's a fairly conceptual thing. How about time? How about, love? There's feelings, there's thoughts, there's actually very deep. If anything, it's the other thing. There's tremendously deep concepts in the scriptures, even the way they're put together, with many layers of understanding. An analogy, right? A parable. That's not... So was Messiah? A lot of these Messianics turn around, that's Greek thinking, that's what you got to do. So was Messiah Greek thinking then? When he explained the parable of the wheat and the tares? Because that's a concept. When you start taking, the wheat are the children of God and the reapers are the angels, you're starting to get very conceptual at that point. What's the end of the world? Is that concrete? A lot of these things, you just have to use your brain. You just have to plug in and go, okay. So there's nothing abstract. There's nothing conceptual to all this stuff. This stuff doesn't have meanings. Prophecy then would go right out the door. That's very conceptual. It's not just concrete. So the fact is these ideas are stupid. They get pushed out, and then people instantly who never did any study themselves one way or another, for it or against it, they just heard a DVD and said, yeah, I've heard that, that's the pastor up there, or, I listened to this video on YouTube, and now we're going to start sharing all these stupid ideas that don't work. They don't hold up to the scripture. There's no people who are all concrete and robotic and other people who are philosophical and the concept itself sounds stupid, but people use it for a purpose, because then that will create a very narrow view of the scriptures, right? Somebody who used that again wouldn't have probably followed Messiah. They'd have walked away going, I don't know why this guy says he's the Son of God, because he's just talking about wheat and tares. He didn't even tell us anything about the kingdom of heaven. Right? Because concrete thinking means it's not about anything else. This was just about wheat and just about tares. Well, good. I'll go check my field. If there's tares in there, I'll let them grow up. And they would have in no way got the meaning that Messiah then later broke down to his disciples. We got to use our brains. You got to stop taking stuff and running with it. Lunar Sabbath. There's all these different teachings and all this kind of stuff that you just gotta have read the Bible and then look at it and then say, does this make sense? Is this really how it is? You're gonna find out, but just don't make a decision and a conclusion based on ignorance. That's what happens when you follow people. You've got somebody else driving the vehicle. Okay? You are meant to drive. You are meant to have read the entire Bible. You are meant to study. And if that means you need to do a word study on a Hebrew word or something like that, then you need to study that too. And don't make the assumption that because you looked it up in Strong's, hey, the truth of the world and even the Hebrew language and all of that were way before Strong's wrote a book, right? You got to stop listening to secondhand information. And you got to, plug your own brain in. Look at it for yourself. Does this make sense, right? Strong's says a word means this, this, and this, and it's consistent all the time, except for in these two spots it means something totally different. That should be a red flag for you. What if those weren't totally different, and in these two spots it meant the other thing? Maybe you look at it and go, yeah, but that doesn't seem to make sense. Just because you don't understand it or it doesn't seem to make sense to you doesn't mean that's not what it is. It doesn't mean the flaw is in the word and you need to change the meaning of the word. The flaw is in your understanding. Right? This is why when Messiah says, eat my flesh, drink my blood, and people are like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Can't be drinking blood. Torah forbids that. They assumed he was wrong. What they didn't do is assume that their understanding of what he was saying was wrong. And that's the problem. Yeah, and that goes back to this humility. How are you going to learn if you think you know? If you have a rigid mind and you think you know things, or the first time you hear it, then that's all you're going to do about it. Or, I did that study once 10 years ago, and so I already know that. Really? And you didn't learn anything in 10 years that maybe you have to go back and check the things and do that study again to make sure you still believe that? Because maybe 3 or 4 different parts of what you used to believe are now changed, and that would make change in what you thought back then. You need to look at it with a fresh set of eyes. That's humility, right? Humility is to be brought down low. Just like when he says, don't forbid the children, right? Except you're as these, you'll in no way enter the kingdom, right? Meanwhile, all of the most learned people, the smartest people come to him thinking they know everything. And they couldn't be corrected, right? That's that hard ground that couldn't be broken up and softened again. You don't have the right to be hard. Messiah, he could be, because he's the truth, right? He knows it, and he knows it frontwards and backwards and how it relates to all these different things. You don't. He's the living word of God. If he says it, that's like scriptures being written as he speaks. For you and me, not the same thing. So we have to stay humble. We don't need to assume we know anything. Because the minute you do that, you shut your mind off. This is the land of humility. It's tilled land. It's ready to receive. It's fertile and ready to grow something. That learning comes out of humility. Nothing grows in pride. Right? It's not able to change. It's not able to make the difference. So with Paro, we see right here that it really was about, it took 10 plagues to soften up the ground enough to where he would submit fully, because he would submit for a moment, and then he'd get stiff-necked again. Then he'd submit partially, but not all the way, and this is his problem. He's fighting it the whole time. The way is righteousness. Everything off the road, that's sin, that's danger, that's punishment, right? And even those sins and all the ways of the world that are horrible, if you go into those, they're bad for you. If you pay attention, you'll see that they're bad for you. And that's what draws people to righteousness and to God. Because they had a taste of the world and realized it wasn't good. The worst place to be is to be in the world and think that everything's great. And to think that those sins that you're doing are paying you some reward. The adultery is somehow fulfilling your desires, and you don't see the problem and the pain that that's causing, both to you and to other people all around you. See, life will give you those clues. They're everywhere. When that person goes and commits adultery, and he's just thinking about himself. He's not thinking about his wife. He's not thinking about his children. And then when that family gets broken up, he's not thinking about the other woman and how by making her an adulterer, that's hurting her. He's not thinking about, let's say she's married, and the other husband and how he's harming that person or their kids and the fact that that family's now broken up and how's that going to affect those kids and how's it going to affect the way they are as a parent and as a husband or wife, and ultimately that spills out all over into the world. Most of those people aren't thinking about anything other than themselves and the moment. And they're not understanding that there's massive implications to what they're doing. They're lacking that awareness. And it's the same way we were talking with Bible study. If you fail to study the whole scriptures and someone comes to you and you have a limited knowledge of here and a little of this and a little of that mixed together, then it's easy for those people to be fooled. It's easy for them to watch a video and go, oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. You could tell those people anything, They'll fall for anything because they don't have any of their own knowledge. Whatever you tell them, as long as it sounds feasible, they'll believe it. And then they'll start going and telling other people about it. And then once a whole bunch of people are saying it, that gets even more ignorant people involved because they go, wow, all these people can't be wrong. And nobody stopped to think. Nobody stopped to study. Right? Meanwhile, the person who does study hears that and goes, oh, that doesn't work in 10 different ways. Let's sit down and talk about this. How is it that they so easily saw that it was wrong while everybody else so easily saw that it could be right? Because they're ignorant. There's just a blank space there. So whatever someone else wants to write in, it seems like it could fit. And that's a danger. We have to stay on the good path. You can't, there's a danger of being lazy and ignorant, right? And there's a danger of thinking you know everything. So it's really a double-edged sword. If you're lazy and you don't study, you're very susceptible. You don't know what the path looks like. So you don't know when you're on it or not. You're going out, driving out in the field, and you've got, your pastor's driving, and that car's shaking up and all that. But he's saying, hey, this is fine. And you're like, yeah, this seems fine. You don't even know what fine is and fine isn't because you've never rode on the road. If you were on the road and had the truth, you'd know that this isn't the truth and this isn't the way you're supposed to go. But if you've never been on a road, then driving through the field could be a road. This could be what roads mean. You got to be able to do that. You got to take the steering wheel and say, hey, I'm driving. This is my life that's at stake here. I'm driving. Right? This is my family's life. It's like I told you. That's why I don't let other people drive on a road trip. I don't fall asleep assuming they're going to be fine. The only way I know it's going to be fine is if my hands are on the steering wheel. Then I know I'm protecting myself, I'm protecting my family, and I'm protecting, my kids, everybody. That's the thing. You got to do that for your own life. You got to be your own protector. And that means protecting yourself against your own ignorance. Also, on the other side, you see their ignorance, or you got to protect yourself against your own pride. You go out, you're zealous, you study a ton, understand that can create pride. You can think stop learning, stop seeing the truth, because you've built up this whole world that you believe. And, it's like a video game world, right? A virtual reality world. All your studies have made your understanding of the scriptures be one thing, and now you're just living in that world. And some people I've met, they're so far off base, but they've been creating that world so detailed for themselves that they're right, they can't see anything else. But they're living in the world of their own imagination. That's why when you study the scriptures, you can't go in there and study trying to find what you already think. You have to go in with a blank slate, willing to give up what you think you know and let the scriptures tell you something. Otherwise, you won't see when it's talking against you. What if that was the opposite? What if it was saying it in a different way, that it was against what I believe? Right? Because people often search the scriptures, but they're interpreting it in a way that makes sense only to support what they already believe. That's not really study. That's seeing the scriptures with a lens that allows you to only see them a certain way. And a lot of people, they're doing a Wednesday Bible study and all this and that. But they've already got, you know what? Christians of all denominations do a Wednesday Bible study. How is it that they can keep getting in the Word and keep coming out with the wrong conclusions? You can take people that believe the exact opposite, and they both do a Wednesday Bible study. How can they keep digging into the Word? And because it's supporting their own thing, because they're not really studying. Studying is when you go in and you say, hey, I don't know. I don't care if I've read it 100 times. I'm going to read it like I know nothing. What does it look like it's saying? And you have to be able to clear out what you think you know. And if that starts to argue with what you originally thought, then you have to weigh it out and go, okay, what is this? If it happens to line up, great. But you can't go looking for it to line up, because then you'll be blind. You'll be the Pharisees who saw the scriptures in one way, and that's the only way they could see them. And so when someone came and told them the truth, they weren't able to hear it. They couldn't understand it. They couldn't see the truth. Therefore, they couldn't see Messiah. So humility brings learning. Pride brings blindness. And pride keeps you. It's like the steering wheel, right? Humility is you're flexible, could go left, could go right, right? When you think you know, then it's like, oh, I can only hold the wheel in one position. I've already figured this out. It won't move. It can't go left, it can't go right. The problem is if you veer off the road and the steering wheel, right? If you're off track, the steering wheel has to turn. That's repentance, to turn back. If you go off track and you're not humble, your steering wheel's locked up and it keeps you from getting back on track. That's a dangerous place to be. And that's where Paro was. Paro was off track, right? And then his steering wheel was hardened with pride. He was in charge, and that kept anybody from changing his direction. And it took plague after plague after plague to loosen up that steering wheel to finally let him head back the other way. But at what cost? What was the cost of being off the road? Was your tire pop? Did an axle break? Did you blow a gasket? Did one of the members in the car fly out the window? What's the cost for that time that you were off track? Because there's always a cost. So when we get off track of the Torah and we go to sin, even if we come back, there's still a cost. So it's better to try and stay on that road and stay flexible, that when the road goes left, you're able to turn to the left. That's how you stay on the road, is staying humble. And you can't learn without humility. It's a driving force. It's when you don't have to think you know anything that you can actually learn everything. And when you think you know everything, you really can't learn anything. So I hope this was a blessing to you. Until next time, I'm going to say shalom. Hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, and feel free to share this if you think there's some people out there who could find a value in learning about humility. Then definitely share it, and I'd love to hear your comments and thoughts in the comments below. Thanks. Until next time, I'm going to say shalom.